If you grabbed a copy of the Tomb of Annihilation during the recent D&D Beyond Season of Horror sale, you're in for one of the best campaigns in all of Dungeons & Dragons. It's one of my absolute personal favorites, and it's massively inspired by the infamous and classic Tomb of Horrors. Today, I'll show you how I run the hook in the opening session in Port Nyanzaru, and how to use some great NPCs and the mysteries of the Death Curse before sending your party into the jungles of Chult, where a terrifying tomb and a world-ending threat and one of D&D's greatest villains awaits. It is so good. I'm Chris. This is The Art of Character, a Dungeons & Dragons podcast where we explore all things D&D. Let's roll. All right. Welcome back to the channel. I'm really glad that you're here. All right, before we get started though, there are spoilers ahead. Don't watch if you are currently a player in any Tomb of Annihilation campaign. DMs, stay tuned. So, this campaign has everything. A world-threatening mystery, dangerous factions, dinosaurs, ancient ruins, deadly traps, memorable NPCs, and one of the greatest final dungeons ever published. And of course, the Lich Acererak. Now, in D&D terms, there's a lot of role-playing and faction play, exploration, traps, puzzles, mysteries to solve, and as much combat as your party is interested in. But before your players experience really any of that, they're going to arrive in Port Nyanzaru. And for a new DM, this can look like a lot. It's huge. Well, it's not really huge, but it is an open city, and it's packed with NPCs and guides and factions, shopping, side activities, and so many places your players can go and explore, and it's easy to wonder as a DM, where do I even start with something like this if I've never run a city before? Or if I'm just a DM running this for the first time, maybe I want some hints. All right, don't worry, I got you. It's actually much easier to run than it looks. And I'm going to break the port section down into 3 shorter videos. First, we're doing this today, the intro and the hook. Then we're going to do a next one on exploring Port Nyanzaru and its encounters. And then one final one on hiring a guide for your expedition. All right, today I'm going to walk you through my custom hook that I use and how I introduce the Death Curse, how I bring in the party's patron, and how I get the adventure started. All right, you ready to get your Indiana Jones on? Let's head into Chult. All right, here we are on D&D Beyond, and I'm going to show you this real quick. Here's some really cool cover art. And if you haven't seen this before, that big kind of devil face there is called the Green Devil Face, and that is infamous in the Tomb of Horrors. Basically, if you step into the mouth in the old school version, or if you reached into it, whatever reached in, or if you stepped into it, you were dead, just disappeared immediately. And that guy right there, that's the famous Lich Acererak. Anyway, that's just the cover art. Pretty cool. All right, so here's the basic backstory. So there's this death curse that's popped up recently, and here's how it works. It's affecting the entire world, and it's preventing anybody from being resurrected or returned from the dead. Even revivify doesn't work. And then, if you've been resurrected in the past, you are slowly starting to die and rot and return to death. You're slowly starting to die. This is affecting everyone, and it's freaking everyone out. All right, the setting is in Chult. It's a jungle peninsula. It's part of the Forgotten Realms. I'll show you a map here in just a minute, but there are dinosaurs and lost cities and ruins, volcanoes, prolific undead, and some very different and unique cultures that are part of Chult. So the source of the death curse is Acererak, but he has created this Soulmonger. It's an artifact that is essentially stealing everyone's souls who dies. And I'll talk about that here more in just a little bit. And the mission is to find the Soulmonger and destroy it. That will stop the death curse. And there are some very important factions here also. So you're going to have a patron. We'll talk about that. There's Acererak, who's kind of at the core of all of this. There's Ras Nasi and the Yuan Ti. So they are in this place called Omu. That's also where the Tomb of Annihilation is. There are the Red Wizards involved. There are some Frost Giants involved. There are other adventuring parties. And then the Harpers, the Flaming Fist, the Emerald Enclave, and the Lord's Alliance. There are kind of any other number of factions that you want to involve or are also interested in solving this. And everyone is starting to, I guess, coalesce down into Chult to kind of figure this all out. And there are some important locations that are part of all this. There's Port Nyanzaru. It's kind of the main port in Chult, and that's where the party will start. Well, they can start on the mainland, but the main place they'll start in Chult is Port Nyanzaru, usually. So the jungle, there's a whole bunch of locations in there. It's a classic kind of a hex crawl and can be really cool and can take as long as you want it to or as short as you want it to, depending upon your party. We're not getting into that now. There's the lost city of Omu, and that's kind of where Acts 3 and 4 are. Act 1 is the port. Act 2, that's the jungle. Act 3 is also kind of on the top of Omu, and then going down underneath Omu is the Tomb of Annihilation. And within the lost city of Omu, there are the 9 shrines to the trickster gods. That's a very important part of the story. There's also the Fane of the Night Serpent, and that's where Rosna C and the Yuan Ti are. And then there is the Tomb of Annihilation, or the Tomb of the Nine Gods, and that is the Sarak's tomb, and that is where kind of this Soulmonger is, and another great evil. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that lore next. And here are a couple of other things for you as a DM to kind of prepare before you do all of this. So learn the basic story, do an overview. I'll show you where that is here in the book. And then also you want to know the death curse mechanics. There are some very specific things that are a part of it. Know that souls are devoured. Know that this is a meat grinder campaign. So your characters can't be revivified. They can't be brought back from the dead. So if they die, they're gone. Kind of permadeath, right? So it is not unheard of to have every member of your party killed at least once during this campaign. Not unheard of at all. It's pretty deadly. Now, there's also this ticking clock mechanic. So there is this thing pushing them along. They can't take forever, or they shouldn't be taking forever. Or I guess essentially this whole thing and all these people who are slowly dying, this death curse will take them all out and it'll kind of be too late. So anyway, there is a ticking clock. Also, there is the weather and the environment and the survival going on in this jungle. There are a bunch of mechanics related to that. You're going to want to learn that also. There are some races of Chult and some cultures of Chult. Good idea to learn those. And then the gods of Chult. So there are Ubtao, the legend of Ubtao, and the 9 trickster gods. All kind of some basic things to read about here in the book. And I'll show you where those are here real quick. Here's the intro and the overview right at the beginning that tells you the basic story. I'll go over that here in just a minute. It tells you about running the adventure, some of the basics, your adventure summary, kind of how it works, who a Sarak is. Here are the basics of the death curse. It talks about it being a meat grinder, the soul devouring thing, so your soul is gone, you're dead, you can't be revivified or brought back. And one of the things that I do is I allow things like revivify to work early on in the campaign, but a little bit later, the death curse gets more serious and even revivify doesn't work. All right, you can't even use the paddles of life to kind of shock them back after they died just moments ago. They're dead, they're not coming back, and now they need to re-roll a new character. Let them know that in session 0. Have a backup character prepared. Very important. Replacement characters right there in the book. The ticking clock mechanic, character advancement, kind of levels you should be, kind of 9th level or higher by the time you get to the final tomb. Then some of the things about Chult, you've got the weather, the races of Chult. It kind of goes over all of that. The Chultans, Chultan names, real important to have some of those in your back pocket. Some of the main races that are here. There's a special tribe of goblins, a special type of dwarf. There are some frost giants, and then grung, the kind of frog people, and then the terrafolk or the terrorfolk. They're kind of like pterodactyl, humanoid types of folks. And then we've got Tabaxi, part of the jungle, and a lot of were-tigers also, and of course, the Yuan Ti. Then there's this here, the gods of Chult, and then it's going to talk about Ubtao and the 9 trickster gods. Then I want to show you this here. So this is in Chapter 3, The Dwellers of the Forbidden City, Omu. But this is going to tell you some important information you can use all the way back at the beginning. The rise of Ras Nasi, some more information about him, the legend of the 9 gods. You're going to not necessarily want to memorize this, but have a really good idea about what's going on here and kind of how it works, because it's a good thing to add a lot of flavor and story and description as you move along to understand the 9 gods, and of course Ubtao, who's the main god here in the land, who has essentially abandoned Chult because of a bunch of things that have happened here, a bunch of evil. So a little bit more about the death curse and something that's really important. The Soulmonger is stealing souls. What that means is it's taking souls from other liches or stealing them before souls can go to other liches' phylacteries. So Zastam in Thay is upset about this, and he has sent some red wizards. That's one of the factions at play and can be very important in what's going on in the story. I use them pretty heavily throughout. And here's a little bit more about Ras Nasi, and I can tell you about him. So he's a fallen paladin, and he was banished. So he was a part of a revolt, and he was banished initially from the city of Mesro. And then what happened is he went off into the jungle, somehow learned how to, tame or raise the dead, and created this army of the undead, and used them to attack Mesro. He was defeated and banished a second time, and his army was scattered off into the jungle. That's kind of one of the main reasons why there are a whole lot of undead here in Chult, plus the death curse. Those two things together, a whole lot of undead. But Ras Nasi was part of that story. So he's defeated 2 times and exiled. And after his second defeat, Ras Nasi slinks off back into the jungle and finds a Yuan Ti in Omu. And he kind of joins forces with them and goes through one of their rituals to transform himself into a Yuan Ti. It's called a Malison. And then he eventually becomes their ruler. And they kind of have this tomb or this temple that they develop. And he has this idea that they're going to bring back dead Dendar the Night Serpent, and they want Dendar the Night Serpent to destroy the world. And that's Ras Nasi's basic purpose right here. He also has a deal struck with Acererak, so he's kind of on top and keeping people out of the tomb or doing some of Acererak's bidding. Ras Nasi thinks Acererak is on his side, but Acererak is just using Ras Nasi. It's part of the sub-story, part of the backstory, but the main important part is Ras Nasi has had a huge impact on Chult. People really hate him, and I kind of use him as a red herring. It's an initial thing that you can do to send characters off or give them hints that Ras Nasi has a much bigger part in this than he actually does. The true villain, the true source of all this is Acererak, and I don't let the players know about that until way at the end. And then, so who is Acererak? So he is this very powerful lich, and he knows Vecna. They have a history. You can read up all on that. But his tie into this story is he loves to travel the planes and go off to other worlds. And in doing so, he came across an Atropal. And an Atropal is basically an abandoned creation of an evil god, kind of like an infant or a fetus of an evil god. Acererak finds this Atropal, brings it down here into this tomb that he has been building. And Acererak loves to build tombs with all kind of puzzles and traps to lure in adventurers and then kill them. It's just kind of one of his main things, right? He doesn't have the same power kind of aspirations that some of these other liches do. He doesn't necessarily want to become a god, but here's what he does want to do with this Atropal. He made the Soulmonger to steal souls, and all of these souls are feeding the Atropal. The Atropal is growing, and the Atropal will eventually become an evil god that will be under Acererak's control. And then Acererak can use that god to go destroy some other gods, or destroy some other liches, or destroy the world, or something like that. But also in this whole process, Acererak is, I guess, kind of being a thorn in the side of all the existing gods, because he's kind of gotten in the way of their resurrection magic. He's gotten in the way of religion and the clerics, and he's also a real thorn in the side of all the liches that are around. So he loves all of that and kind of loves all of this chaos that he has created. And that is the core of the story, or the great big mystery and the great big kind of final thing the characters are trying to solve. So I usually start the characters off on the Sword Coast, somewhere like Waterdeep, a great big city, and Waterdeep is kind of the biggest city, kind of like New York City, so it makes sense to me. And I have an agent approach them. So the characters of the party have already heard about the death curse or hearing rumors about it. And this agent approaches them and says, hey, we'd like to hire you for a job. We're hiring adventurers. Are you interested? And if they want to know more, say it has to do with the death curse. We're looking for people to help us solve this mystery. And we can teleport you over to Chult and meet with your potential new boss if you're willing. And of course, the characters are probably going to be willing. Make it as cool as you can, right? And so usually I have the portal appear right in the room in whichever tavern they're staying in. Let them do a little bit of time there in the city. They can prepare for the adventure or anything like that, and then port them over to Port Nyanzaru. All right. And so who I use for the patron, so the one they suggest in the book is Lady Syndra Silvane. We can look at her right here. And Syndra Silvane is a retired adventurer, a merchant who was raised from the dead, and now she's starting to wither away due to the death curse. But I use someone a little bit more important. I use Lady Laeral Silverhand. She is the open lord of Waterdeep and one of the most respected and powerful individuals in all of Faerun. And I love using her. And I basically do the same story for her because, as rumor has it, she was also raised from the dead before, unnaturally old. There's kind of this interesting backstory around her. And she has a partner named Wakanga who is in Port Nyanzaru. He's one of the merchant princes who kind of runs this port. And here's why I make the entrance. The players arrive through this portal right in Wakanga's kind of merchant prince villa. And this is an opulent, it's not really a palace, it's just a really nice kind of rich guy's house, right? But it's in this really opulent kind of a jungle atmosphere. So there are vines and flowers and colors, all these spices and smells and fruit, and there are kind of parrots and jungle birds and some monkeys and things all flitting about. And they're kind of set down right outside this audience chamber. And as soon as they sit down, they see another adventuring party going into this audience chamber and get a glimpse inside. And they see this guy Wakanga, a couple of other people, and they can't quite see what's behind a veil. And then they're served some pastries and some fruit, a little bit of wine or some coffee and tea, made comfortable. And they're just going to chat a little bit with the servants, not a big deal. And then it's their turn, and they go on through and they meet Lady Laeral Silverhand. She's behind this veil. And so Wakanga's going to introduce himself. He's this merchant prince. He's going to let them know he's one of the patrons patrons that's hiring them, and they can always come to him for help or come back if they have any questions. And then he introduces the lady, and she's going to kind of give them the rundown a little bit. She's going to talk about the death curse and say, hey, here's what's going on. Here are the basics. And she's going to say she knows that the source of this death curse is somewhere in Chult. She doesn't know what's causing it, and she doesn't know exactly where it is, but she's willing to hire them. I say, hey, she'll give them 200 gold, and if they're able to solve or end this death curse, she will give them a powerful magic item out of her treasury, and they can also keep any of the other treasure they find along the way, as long as they return whatever is responsible for this death curse. If they can return that to her, then that is kind of also a core of this bargain or a core of this deal. And then over the course of the conversation, I basically have her checking in to see, like, are they good people? Are they going to follow through with what they say they're going to do? Are they going to take this seriously? Are they willing to potentially sacrifice themselves to save the world? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But she's also going to let them in, let them know a little bit more about who she is, let them know that she's affected by the death curse. And then at one point, she draws back the curtain and introduces herself so the players can see her. She's famous. They know who she is. They can see some of her flesh starting to decay and kind of see the effects. And she says, I'm Lady Laeral Silverhand at your service. I would love to be your patron and hire you for this. And of course, they're probably going to fall to their knees or something like that. She's a really powerful person, also very beautiful, but starting to have the effects of the death curse. Really play this up a lot, and then kind of suddenly end the meeting, send them on their way. They give them their 200 gold each, which is quite a bit, and gives them a little bit of instruction. She says, you probably want to hire a guide. You probably need some adventuring supplies, and I suggest you get going right away because we're not sure how much longer this death curse will go before something even worse happens. So the ticking clock mechanic. And then what I do is have kind of their local guide introduced. And what I do is I introduce a double agent. So it is someone who works for Wakanga, who's going to show them around locally. But I also have this person working for maybe for a Sararak, maybe for Rosnasi, maybe for the Red Wizards, something like that. A double agent. And Lady Silverhand and Wakanga don't know this person is a double agent. But so right as they're getting ready to go out, this person comes in, meets with them. Hey, this is going to be your guide. He's real friendly, real jolly, that kind of a thing. And as they're on their way out, there's another adventuring party headed in. So really, they get the idea. Others are being hired right here on the spot. And that kind of ends the basic initial meeting. Now I'm going to show you a few more things. So here's Chult. And basically how this works is over here on this side, this is Faerun, right? And then this is kind of way down south. The Sword Coast is kind of way up here, and this is way down south. And a couple of things. Here is Port Nyanzaru right here. And then that's kind of Act 1. Act 2 is kind of all this stuff in the jungle. And all of these locations, most of them have mini maps and kind of these encounters or mini adventures that you can do. The rest of this is a hex crawl, and you can do all kinds of random encounters or not so random encounters. I like doing planned encounters that really make sense. And then down here, this is Act 3 and 4. This is Omu down here, and that is where the Tomb of Annihilation and Rosnasi and the Sararak Satropal and the Soulmonger, all that stuff are right there. So they're probably going to start up here in the port, move on down here through the jungle, pick up clues, figure out that the Death Curse and the Soulmonger are part of all this and down in Omu, and they need to find it. And here's Port Nyanzaru, and I'll give you a little bit of an idea. We're not going to go over the whole thing. That's part of the next couple of videos, but here's how it works. It is a walled city. And there's a port, which is blocked off here with a little wall and a chain. So there are, outside of this port, there are undead and dinosaurs and all kinds of other scary things. Parts of the city are outside of the wall. Those are the poor parts of the city. But where the characters are going to start are right up here in the Merchant Ward. These areas called 5. It's kind of like a city within a city. And here's how it works. It's kind of up on this hill and walled off. There's this bridge here, kind of up on another hill and walled off. And then over here, up on another hill. So the merchants, 5, 5, and 5, they kind of have themselves all separated from the rest of the world. And the party is going to meet in one of these merchant villas up here in this terraced wall walled off kind of, I guess you call it a gated community for D&D, but that's where they're going to start. All right. And then kind of how I start this is the guide brings them out and they can kind of get a sense of everything that's going on right here in the city. There's some great text right here in the book. You appear in a tropical city under the blazing sun, the familiar sounds of a harbor, creaking ropes, slapping waves, heavy barrels rolling across cobblestones, mingled with voices shouting and cursing in an unfamiliar language filled with clicks, inhalations, and sing-songy words that make it sound almost musical. The aroma of unfamiliar spices and tropical fruit mixes with the wharfside smells of fish, tar, and canvas. Beyond that, there's an explosion of color, etc., etc. And then kind of beyond that in the city, it's all this culture, all these different races, all these different colors, all this art and murals on the walls, and then dinosaurs used as beasts of burden. You have monkeys and birds and smells and fruit just kind of play up this whole thing, this whole atmosphere and environment. It's really different from the typical fantasy setting that's usually part of the Forgotten Realms, and I absolutely love it. And just have fun with it. Describe it to the best of your ability. There's some great words right here in the book, and kind of riff off of that and just come up with something that sounds absolutely amazing anyway. And then usually what I do to end this is I have the guide say he will meet the party back at Wakanga's villa the next morning, and he'll guide them around the city. They can do some shopping, gear up for the expedition, and find a guide. He gives them a couple of inns and taverns they can check out for the evening, and that's it. They're started. So hopefully that gives you some great ideas on how to get the Tomb of Annihilation started at your table. I really like starting out with the bigger patron and making that first meeting feel really important. This is a huge adventure. The death curse is affecting the entire world, and other adventuring parties are being sent out also to look for this. And there are a lot of other factions involved also. So I want the players to get a taste of that right out of the gate. But make it your own. Use Syndra Silvane if you want to. Use Lady Silverhand if you want to. Come up with your own patron if that makes sense. Start wherever you want on the mainland. You can even fit this into a homebrew campaign, whatever works. Have some fun with the hook and give the players a good reason to care about what's happening next. And once they get to the port, don't freak out if you don't have a lot of experience exploring city environments as a DM. There are a lot of things a party can potentially do, but you don't have to prepare for all of it. In the next video, I'll show you how I break down the port and what I actually prepare, and how I use a city guide to give the party some direction without taking away all of their choices. That makes the whole thing a lot easier to run, and there's some really fun stuff in there. I love some of the stuff in the port. There are dinosaur races and gladiator fights. There are shopping expeditions. I mean, if you want to do at least one of those for a campaign, maybe not more than one, and a few other surprises along the way. Then I'll get into how you hire a guide and get ready for the jungle in the third episode. And however you choose to run the Tomb of Annihilation, I hope all of your adventures there are complete horror. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Art of Character. If you've made it this far, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing, or click below and join our Patreon or our Discord. You can also click below and get something from our merch store. Until next time.